very interesting question about No Child Left Behind, and where does the federal government get the right to enforce this, or get the authority to enforce this? There's nothing in the Constitution about education. And some students mistakenly think that Article 1, Section 8, which provides the powers to Congress, gives them the right to create schools or fund schools, because it says, let's provide for the general welfare in the first clause, and then the elastic clause allows them to expand that notion. Well, not quite. That's not it. In fact, the federal government really wasn't involved in education in general in public schools until probably 1899 was the first time, and it was through a Supreme Court decision, Cummings versus Richmond Board of Education. This is where several African-American families sued the county because they were shutting down the only black high school in order to fund 4 white elementary schools. Long story short, the Supreme Court of the United States determined that there was no discrimination that was going on here. Now, where was the basis for this? It was the 14th Amendment passed after the Civil War, which said that states could not discriminate, and that they had to protect the rights of their citizens. All right, so this is basically the federal government through the courts telling the states that the 10th Amendment, which provides them what has been known as states' rights, doesn't mean you can do anything you want. And this was so this is kind of a way that they would get around the 10th Amendment is through the 14th Amendment. I'll explain in a minute. And so what happens is that in 1954, Brown versus Board of Education decides that the 1899 decision was wrong. And they also overturn the decision, Plessy versus Ferguson, 3 years earlier, which states that separate but equal is okay. They say that you cannot separate black and white students and inherently have an equal education system. So this is a further extension of the power, and sort of in reverse. The fact that in 1899 they made a decision on this. Now they're saying they're making another decision on education, and they're also doing it through the 14th Amendment and saying that this does violate, separate but equal does violate the rights of African Americans. Now, this gives the power to the federal government, mainly the executive branch, to enforce this decision, but they don't really do much with it. So what happens in 1965, the legislative branch, Congress, passes the Elementary and Secondary Act, which says that money will be given to states to fund schools that have a certain number of students in poverty in order to provide for equal opportunity. And a lot of this equal opportunity, most of it has to do with disabled students. And there's some other clauses in here as well. But the basic gist is that the federal government is getting around the 10th Amendment and saying that we are protecting equality. We're not telling you what to do, states, but we are giving you money in order to make sure that equality occurs. And as long as you follow our rules, you get the money. Otherwise, you don't get it. So we're not telling you what to do, but we're giving you money. And it's interesting the way this happens, because the principle here, of course, is federalism, but the interpretation, there's two sides of federalism. One is the states' rights. The other is the federal authority. And in this scenario, what you have is the legislative branch making a decision about money to the states. You have the executive branch creating the Office of Education, which later becomes the Department of Education. And you have the judicial branch, which is making sure that all these rules are being followed.